Why your life sucks as a Viking Raider, so you think being a Viking Raider is all about sailing into the sunset with your brothers? Pillaging monasteries and getting your pick of terrified villagers? You've been watching too many movies, my friend. Let me paint you a picture of what your life actually looks like when you read part of history's most overrated boy band. The glorious ship life. You know what nobody tells you about longships? You're basically floating coffins with the structural integrity of a wet cardboard box. Picture this. You're crammed shoulder to shoulder with 30 other unwashed, garlic-breathed warriors in a vessel that's maybe 80 feet long if you're lucky. That's less space per person than a modern airplane seat, except your flight lasts for weeks. There's no bathroom. And instead of peanuts, you re-sharing hardtack that has been soaked in seawater and probably has more marine life in it than the ocean you recrossing. The smell? Well, the smell is something special. It's like someone took a gym sock, stuffed it with rotting fish, dipped it in vomit, then left it in a sauna for 3 months. That's just Tuesday morning. By the time you've been at sea for a week, you've developed a tolerance to stenches that would make a plague doctor weep. Your nose has basically given up and filed for early retirement, and the motion sickness. Every single wave feels like Thor himself is playing ping pong with your stomach. You'll spend half your voyage hanging over the side, feeding the fish with whatever's left of your breakfast, while your brothers-in-arms laugh and call you Sea Week. Nothing says fearsome warrior like projectile vomiting into the North Sea, while crying for your mother. The sleeping arrangements are about as comfortable as a medieval torture device. You get to curl up on a wooden bench with maybe a thin hide for padding, assuming the guy next to you doesn't roll over and accidentally elbow you in the kidneys. Sweet dreams, Viking boy. The nutritious Viking diet. Let's talk about food, because apparently your ancestors thought that taste was for weaklings. Your basic Viking diet consists of hardtack dried fish that's been sitting in barrels for God knows how long. An ale that's weak enough to pass for water but strong enough to make you forget how miserable you are. The hardtack is particularly special. It's so hard you could use it as armor. And it's got the nutritional value of tree bark. You'll spend half your mealtime trying to soften it with your saliva, the other half picking out the weevils. Yes, weevils, little protein-packed. Surprises that remind you that even insects have better living conditions than you do. The dried fish? It's about as appetizing as leather jerky, but with the added bonus of random bones that like to surprise you by nearly choking you to death. Nothing says Valhalla-bound warrior like dying because you couldn't properly chew your lunch. And when you finally reach land after weeks of this maritime hell, you're not exactly hitting up the local McDonald's. You're raiding monasteries, which means your fine dining experience consists of whatever the monks had lying around. Spoiler alert, monks aren't exactly known for their culinary expertise. You'll be lucky if you find some stale bread and maybe a turnip that's only slightly rotten. The irony. You're risking your life to steal food that's probably worse than what you left at home. Your mother's overcooked mutton is starting to look like a 5-star meal compared to whatever moldy cheese you just liberated from Brother Benedict's pantry. The honorable raiding life here, what they do and show you in the movies. Most of your glorious raids are about as exciting as robbing a nursing home. You're not battling armored knights and epic sword duels. You're terrorizing farmers who've probably never held a weapon more dangerous than a pitchfork. And monks whose biggest life decision was whether to wake up at 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. for morning prayers. The fierce resistance you encounter usually consists of a village priest throwing his prayer book at you while running away screaming. Real David versus Goliath stuff right there. We'll spend more time chasing chickens than fighting actual warriors, and somehow, the chickens put up a better fight. And the loot? Half the time, you're re-risking your life for what amounts to a handful of silver coins and maybe a decent pair of boots. You're not exactly swimming in treasure chests full of gold. Most villages have about as much wealth as a modern college student, which is to say, practically nothing. The real kicker is when you finally do encounter actual resistance. Suddenly, all those years of bragging about your fighting skills don't mean much when you face-to-face with someone who actually knows which end of a sword to hold. That romantic notion of dying gloriously in battle? It's a lot less romantic when you're bleeding out in a muddy field, wondering if your death will even make it into a half-decent saga. The brotherhood and social dynamics. Let's talk about your fellow Vikings, your brothers-in-arms, your shield brothers. These are the guys you're supposed to trust with your life, the ones who'll have your back in battle, your ride-or-die crew. In reality, they're more like the world's most dysfunctional fraternity. First, there's Bjorn the Loud, who apparently thinks volume equals authority. He'll spend the entire voyage telling the same 5 stories about that one time he almost fought a bear, each telling getting more elaborate and less believable. By the end of the trip, he was practically wrestling Jormungandr with his bare hands. Then there's Olaf the Unlucky, who somehow manages to trip over his own feet while standing still. This is the guy who's supposed to watch your back in battle, but can't even watch his own step while boarding the ship. It's like having a walking disaster as your backup. Don't forget about Eric the Emotional. He turns into a weeping mess every time he gets drunk, which is basically every night. Nothing kills the mood of a victory celebration like Eric sobbing about how much he misses his mother while you retrying to divide up the loot. The hierarchy is basically a medieval high school cafeteria. You've got your popular kids, your wannabes, and your outcasts. Guess which category you fall into as a newbie. The hazing rituals make fraternity pledging look like a spa weekend. You'll get friendly nicknames based on your most embarrassing moments, and trust me, nothing stays secret on a longship. That time you cried during your first raid. You're now Tearbeard. For the rest of your natural life, the glorious battle reality combat as a Viking Raider is nothing like the movies. It's not a choreographed dance of steel and honor. It's chaos, confusion, and a lot of people screaming and dying in ways that would make a horror movie director uncomfortable. First off, your legendary weapons. That sword you're so proud of. It's probably hand-me-down iron that has been reforged so many times it is basically held together by prayers and wishful thinking. Your shield is made of wood that's been patched more times than a Viking's cloak. And your armor is whatever leather scraps you could piece together that don't completely restrict your movement. The battlefield is nothing like the clean, dramatic fights you see in movies. It's muddy, bloody, and filled with the kind of smells that make your pre-battle meal want to make a return appearance. You're slipping on entrails, trying not to trip over body parts, and wondering why nobody warned you about the sound wounded men make when they're dying, and the berserkers. Those legendary warriors who fight in a trance-like fury. Half of them are just terrified teenagers who've psyched themselves up to the point of temporary insanity. The other half are dealing with what we'd now recognize as severe PTSD. But since therapy won't be invented for another 1,000 years, they just scream a lot and hope it helps. The glorious death in battle you've been promised? Most guys don't die heroically with sword in hand. They die from infections, dysentery, or getting trampled by their own side. If you're lucky enough to die in actual combat, it's probably going to be from a spear in the back while you're running away, not from a face-to-face duel with a worthy opponent. The exotic travel experience you thought being a Viking Raider meant seeing the world? Congratulations, you've traded your boring village life for a slightly different boring village life, except now you're the one doing the terrorizing instead of being terrorized. It's like being a tourist. If tourists burned down everything they visited and killed the locals, your exotic destinations are usually just variations on the same theme. Small coastal settlements that look remarkably similar to the one you left behind, except now they're on fire and full of screaming people. It's like the world's most violent and least educational study abroad program. The cultural exchange you experience mostly consists of learning new and creative ways to curse at people in languages you do and speak. Your linguistic education is limited to phrases like, "Where's your gold? Please don't kill me," in broken Latin and Old English. And the weather. Oh, the weather is consistently terrible no matter where you go. You'll experience the same bone-chilling cold, the same soaking rain, on the same howling winds whether you're in Norway, Scotland, or Ireland. It's like nature itself is trying to tell you that maybe this raiding thing isn't such a great career choice. The adventure of exploring new lands mostly involves a lot of walking through mud, sleeping in the rain, and trying not to get lost in forests that all look exactly the same. You'll develop an intimate relationship with every type of uncomfortable terrain known to medieval man. The profitable economics of raiding. Let's talk about the business side of Viking raiding, because apparently your career counselor forgot to mention that this is basically a pyramid scheme with axes. You're not exactly getting a steady salary or benefits package here. First, there's the startup costs. You need a ship, weapons, supplies, and a crew. Unless you're already wealthy, you're basically going into debt before you even leave port. It's like starting a business where your business plan is sail somewhere and hope there's stuff worth stealing. Then there's the profit-sharing arrangement. After a successful raid, the loot gets divided up among the crew, with the biggest shares going to the ship's owner and the most senior raiders. As a newbie, you're basically getting the medieval equivalent of minimum wage. Except, instead of flipping burgers, you're risking your life to steal someone else's livestock. The overhead costs are brutal. Food, supplies, ship maintenance, and replacing all the gear you lose or break during raids. By the time you factor in all the expenses, you're probably making less than a skilled craftsman back home, and he doesn't have to worry about getting a sword through the chest as an occupational hazard, and the market is getting saturated. Every Viking and his brother is trying to get into the raiding business. You're competing with dozens of other crews for the same limited number of profitable targets. It's like trying to make money as a freelance burglar in a neighborhood where everyone else is also a freelance burglar. The retirement plan? What retirement plan? You raid until you're too old, too injured, or too dead to continue? There's no Viking 401k, no pension, and definitely no health insurance. Your golden years are going to be spent telling stories about the good old days to anyone who LOL. Listen, assuming you live long enough to have golden years. The legendary reputation management. Here's the thing about being a feared Viking Raider. Your reputation precedes you, but not always in the way you'd hope. Sure, people are afraid of you, but they're also taking active steps to make sure you don't get what you came for. By the time you show up to raid a monastery, they've already buried their valuables, hidden their food, and sent their best stuff to the next village over. You're not exactly catching anyone by surprise anymore. Your stealth approach is about as subtle as a brass band announcement. The local populations have also gotten wise to your tactics. They've built watchtowers, organized militias, and established early warning systems. What used to be easy pickings has turned into actual work. You're now facing organized resistance from people who VA had decades to figure out how to deal with Viking raiders, and the political situation is getting complicated. Kings and lords are starting to offer protection to settlements in exchange for taxes and loyalty. You're not just raiding farmers anymore. You're potentially starting international incidents. That little monastery you hit last month? Turns out it was under the protection of a king who has a lot more soldiers than you do. The Christian kingdoms are getting their act together too. They're starting to coordinate their responses, share intelligence, and even launch counter-raids. Suddenly, your home village isn't as safe as it used to be. You might come back from a raid to find that someone else has been raiding your family while you were gone. The spiritual aspects of Viking life. Let's talk about religion, because apparently, the gods have a sense of humor, and you're the punchline. You've been told that dying gloriously in battle guarantees you a spot in Valhalla where you'll feast and fight for eternity. Sounds great, right? Well, let's unpack that a bit. First off, the competition for Valhalla is fierce. You're not just competing with other Vikings. You're competing with every warrior who's ever died in battle since the beginning of time. It's like trying to get into an exclusive club where the bouncer is literally death himself, and he's got very specific standards. And let's be honest about your chances of a glorious death. Most of your combat experience consists of terrorizing unarmed civilians and running away when actual soldiers show up. Your odds of dying heroically in battle are about the same as your odds of becoming the next skald to compose epic poetry about your adventures. The whole feasting for eternity thing sounds less appealing when you consider that it's probably the same food you've been eating your entire life. Congratulations, you've earned the right to eat hardtack and dried fish forever. Even in the afterlife, you can't escape the Viking diet. And the eternal fighting in Valhalla, that's supposed to be the reward? You've spent your entire life trying to avoid getting killed in combat, and now your idea of paradise is doing it every single day for the rest of eternity. It's like being stuck in the world's most violent Groundhog Day. Meanwhile, the Christian monks you've been raiding keep talking about a paradise where you get to sit around peacefully for eternity, singing hymns and enjoying perfect weather. You're starting to wonder if maybe you picked the wrong team. The romantic homecoming after months of raiding, you finally get to return home to your loving family and peaceful village. Except by the time you get back, you've been gone so long that nobody really remembers who you are. Your wife has been managing just fine without you, and your kids have gotten used to not having you around. Your triumphant return is less conquering hero and more weird uncle who shows up at family gatherings with questionable stories and a drinking problem. You've been living in a hyper-masculine bubble of violence and brotherhood for months, and now you're expected to seamlessly transition back into domestic life. The stories you want to tell about your adventures, nobody really wants to hear them. Your wife doesn't want to know about the villages you burned or the people you killed. Your children are more interested in their daily lives than your tales of maritime misery. The neighbors are polite, but you can tell they think you're a bit unhinged. And the loot you brought back? It's never quite enough to justify the time you were gone. You've been risking your life for months, and you've come back with enough silver to buy maybe a couple of goats and some new clothes. Your neighbor, the blacksmith, has probably made more money in the same time period, and he never had to worry about dying of dysentery on a ship. The readjustment period is brutal. You've spent months sleeping on wooden benches, eating terrible food, and living in constant fear of death. Now you're expected to care about things like crop rotation and village politics. It's like being a war correspondent who has to come home and write about local school board meetings. The sustainable career path, here's the career advice nobody gives you. Viking raiding has a pretty short shelf life. You're not building skills that transfer to other professions. Experienced in pillaging and maritime terrorism isn't exactly a resume booster in the civilian world. The physical demands of raiding are brutal on your body. All that rowing, fighting, and sleeping on hard surfaces is going to catch up with you. Your joints are going to start complaining, your back is going to give out, and your reflexes are going to slow down. In a profession where being a split second slower can mean death, aging is not your friend, and the mental toll. Let's just say that PTSD wasn't exactly recognized as a medical condition in medieval Scandinavia. You're going to be dealing with nightmares, flashbacks, and a general inability to relate to normal human emotions. Your coping mechanisms are limited to drinking and telling increasingly embellished stories about your glory days. The younger generation is looking at your lifestyle and thinking, maybe I'll learn a trade instead.
Nice.
They re-seeing the older raiders, the ones who survived, and noticing that they not exactly poster children for successful aging. Missing limbs, chronic pain, and alcoholism aren't exactly selling points for the Viking lifestyle. Plus, the world is changing. Trade is becoming more profitable than raiding. Kingdoms are getting more organized and better at defense. The easy targets are drying up, and the profitable ones are becoming increasingly dangerous. You're basically in a declining industry, like being a blacksmith in the age of mass production. The glorious leadership structure, let's talk about your chain of command. Because apparently, even violent criminals need middle management. The leadership structure of a Viking raid is like a corporation. If corporations were run by people who settled disputes with axes, at the top, you've got the Jarl or ship's captain, who's basically your CEO, except instead of PowerPoint presentations, he communicates through intimidation and the occasional beheading. This is the guy who owns the ship, takes the biggest share of the loot, and makes all the strategic decisions. He's also the guy who gets to sleep in the slightly less uncomfortable part of the ship. Then you've got the Huskarls, the professional warriors, who are basically middle management. They re the ones who translate the captain's brilliant strategies into actual tactics that the rest of you can understand. They re also the ones who get to tell you that your ideas are stupid and your fighting technique needs work. Below that, you've got the regular crew members, the rank-and-file raiders who do most of the actual work. This is probably where you fit in. You're responsible for rowing, fighting, and following orders, but you don't get much say in how things are done. You're basically a medieval intern, except instead of coffee runs, you're doing murder runs. The decision-making process is about as democratic as a dictatorship. Captain makes the decisions, and everyone else gets to live with the consequences. Don't like the target he's chosen? Too bad. Think his strategy is flawed? Keep it to yourself. Want to suggest a different approach? Enjoy your new job as shark bait and the communication style. It's mostly shouting with the occasional threat of violence thrown in for emphasis. Performance reviews are conducted with swords, and your job security depends on your ability to not die during the quarterly raid. Exotic weather and living conditions, nobody talks about the weather in Viking life. It's probably because it's consistently terrible, and there's not much point in complaining about something you queue and change. But let's talk about it anyway, because it's a major part of your daily misery. The North Atlantic is not exactly a tropical paradise. The water is cold enough to kill you in minutes. The wind is strong enough to knock you off your feet. And the rain is persistent enough to make you question your life choices. You'll spend most of your time wet, cold, and wishing you were somewhere else. On the ship, there's no shelter from the elements. You're basically living outdoors for weeks at a time, exposed to whatever weather the North Sea decides to throw at you. Your clothes are constantly damp, your food is soaked, and your mood is about as stormy as the skies above you. And when you finally make landfall, the weather doesn't get any better. You'll be camping in fields, sleeping in abandoned buildings, or hiding in forests. Your accommodations are whatever shelter you can find or build, which is usually not much better than what you had on the ship. The seasonal timing of raids is dictated by weather patterns, which means you're always fighting against the elements. Summer raids mean dealing with storms and rough seas. Winter raids mean dealing with ice, snow, and the very real possibility of freezing to death. Your gear is constantly battling the elements too. Your weapons rust, your leather goods rot, and your clothes fall apart. You'll spend almost as much time maintaining your equipment as you do using it, and replacement gear is expensive and hard to come by. The irony is that you're traveling to places with equally terrible weather. You're not escaping the harsh Nordic climate, you're just experiencing it in different locations. It's like being a meteorologist who specializes in misery. The efficient communication system communication in a Viking raiding party is about as sophisticated as smoke signals, except less reliable and more prone to misinterpretation. You're dealing with a group of people who think subtlety is a sign of weakness and diplomacy is what you do after you run out of axes. The language barrier is a constant problem. You're raiding communities that speak different languages, and your linguistic skills are limited to basic threats and demands. Most of your negotiations involve pointing weapons at people and hoping they understand what you want. It's like being a tourist who only knows how to say, "Stick 'em up" in the local language. Even communication within your own crew is challenging. You've got people from different regions with different dialects, different accents, and different ways of expressing themselves. Add in the constant background noise of wind, waves, and warfare, and you're basically playing a deadly game of telephone. The chain of command communication is particularly problematic. Orders get passed down through multiple layers of increasingly drunk and increasingly stupid intermediaries. By the time a simple command like "attack the monastery" reaches you, it's been transformed into something like "dance with the monkeys" or "stack the manatees." And forget about long-term planning or strategic thinking. Your communication system is designed for immediate tactical needs. There's no way to coordinate complex operations or adjust strategies based on changing circumstances. It's like trying to run a business using only post-it notes and shouting. The feedback system is also broken. If you have concerns or suggestions, your options are limited to keeping them to yourself or getting beaten up for insubordination. There's no suggestion box, no open door policy, and definitely no anonymous feedback system. The advanced medical care. Let's talk about healthcare. Because apparently, your medical plan consists of don't get hurt, and if you do get hurt, try not to die. The medical knowledge of your average Viking Raider is about as sophisticated as a medieval Band-Aid. Your ship's medic is usually whoever has the steadiest hands and the strongest stomach. His medical training consists of whatever folk remedies he learned from his grandmother and whatever he's picked up from watching people die in interesting ways. His diagnostic tools are limited to poking wounds with dirty fingers and asking, "Does this hurt?" The treatment options are equally primitive. Got a cut? Slap some mud on it and hope for the best. Broken bone? Tie it to a stick and try not to use it? Infected wound? Time to break out the hot iron and pray to whatever gods are listening. Anesthesia consists of drinking until you pass out, and the success rate. Let us just say that your chances of surviving a serious injury are about the same as your chances of becoming the next Norse god. Most medical treatments are more likely to kill you than the original injury. It's like having a healthcare system run by people who think bloodletting is cutting-edge technology. The preventive care is non-existent. There's no such thing as regular checkups, vaccinations, or health screenings. Your health maintenance program consists of eat when you can, sleep when you can, and try not to think about what that rash might be. Dental care is particularly barbaric. Your oral hygiene routine consists of chewing on twigs and hoping your teeth don't fall out. When they do fall out, your replacement options are limited to learn to gum your food or carve some new teeth out of walrus ivory. Mental health care is even more primitive. Your treatment for psychological trauma consists of drinking more ale and telling people to toughen up. Depression is treated with violence, anxiety is treated with more violence, and PTSD is treated with ... You guessed it, more violence. The Stockholm Syndrome conclusion, and yet despite all of this, the misery, the danger, the terrible food, the worse company, the chronic health problems, and the general awfulness of everything, you'll probably look back on your Viking raiding days with a twisted sense of nostalgia. You'll find yourself missing the camaraderie of shared suffering, the simplicity of a life where your biggest decision was which end of your sword to hold, and the clarity that comes from knowing that every day might be your last. You'll tell stories about the good old days when men were men, boats were boats. The biggest worry you had was whether you'd die from dysentery or a Saxon spear. You'll conveniently forget about the seasickness. It's a terrible weather, the constant fear, and the fact that you spent most of your time wet, cold, and hungry. Your children will roll their eyes when you start talking about how things were different back in your day. How young people today are soft, and how they don't make raiders like they used to. You'll become that guy who peaked in high school, except instead of high school, it was a decade of maritime terrorism and cultural destruction. You'll probably even encourage your own sons to take up the family business, knowing full well what they're getting into. Because deep down you know that despite everything, those were the days when you felt most alive, most connected to your fellow man, and most certain of your place in the world. Even if that place was the bottom of a longship's social hierarchy, it's the ultimate Stockholm syndrome, falling in love with your captor. Except in this case, your captor is a lifestyle that's actively trying to kill you in the most unpleasant ways possible. You will spend the rest of your life wondering if maybe you should have just stayed home and learned pottery instead. So here's to you, Viking Raider. May your ship always leak just enough to keep you awake at night. May your enemies always be just competent enough to make things interesting. And may your saga be just epic enough that people remember your name long after they've forgotten why dying gloriously in battle seemed like a good idea. And may you never have to explain to your grandchildren why you chose a career path that made medieval farming look like a luxury vacation. Skull, you magnificent misguided bastard. Skull.